My name is Wilda Watson, and I'm 31 years old. I still remember the exact smell of that evening, pot roast and tension. My brother Callum had just walked through the front door with his pregnant wife, Serena, and the moment she stepped inside, something shifted in the air. I had been living in my childhood home for 8 months by that point, ever since I lost my job at the architecture firm after a round of layoffs that gutted half our department. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't a freeloader. I was paying what I could toward utilities, cooking meals, keeping the house clean, and actively interviewing every single week. But none of that mattered the moment Serena decided she needed my room. She walked through the hallway, peered into my bedroom, which was the largest guest room in the house, and turned to my father with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This would be perfect for the nursery," she said, as if I wasn't standing 3 feet away. My father looked at me, and I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Not apology. Not hesitation. Convenience. He cleared his throat and said, "Wilda, you're going to need to vacate the room." I blinked. I thought I had misheard him. I said, "Dad, all my things are in there. Where exactly am I supposed to go?" He waved his hand vaguely toward the small storage room at the end of the hall, the one with no window and a broken radiator, and said that it would be fine for now. I stood there processing what was happening while Serena walked into my room and started mentally redecorating it out loud. She was talking about paint colors and crib placement while my entire sense of safety crumbled quietly beneath my feet. I looked at my father again, hoping he would say something, take it back, remember that I was his daughter too. But he just nodded along with her like I had already agreed, like I had already disappeared. That was when Serena turned to me with that same thin smile and said, "Honestly, it would be better if you left the house altogether." Not as a suggestion. As a verdict. There was a mockery layered underneath it, something that said she already knew the outcome of this conversation before it started. My father didn't correct her. He didn't even flinch. He looked at the floor for exactly 2 seconds, and then back up at Serena and said, "She understands. Don't you, Wilda?" And in that moment, I understood something, but it had nothing to do with what he thought. What I understood was that I had been tolerating a version of my father that had been slowly shrinking me my whole life, and I had been so desperate for his approval that I kept making myself smaller just to fit inside his idea of who I should be. I had been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never caused problems, and in return, I had received nothing but the title of burden the moment I needed something back. I went to my room. I pulled out 2 suitcases. I packed methodically and without tears because I had learned a long time ago that crying in front of people who don't care about your pain only satisfies them. I took my laptop, my design portfolio, my grandmother's jewelry box, and every document I owned. My father stood in the hallway as I rolled my suitcase toward the front door and said, "You're being dramatic." I didn't answer him. Callum, my own brother, stood beside Serena in the kitchen doorway and said nothing. Absolutely nothing. I closed the front door behind me and sat in my car in the driveway for 4 minutes, just breathing. Then I drove away. I had $3,000 in savings and a contact, an old college friend named Priya, who had a spare room she was willing to rent short-term. I moved in that night. The room was small and the mattress was unfamiliar, and I lay awake until almost 4 in the morning just staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. Not with sadness, but with a strange and clarifying anger that felt almost like fuel. Something had broken inside me, but it wasn't the part that kept me going. It was the part that had been holding me back, the part that kept waiting for my father to finally see me, to finally choose me. That part shattered completely on the drive to Priya's, and I didn't mourn it. 2 days passed. I had updated my resume, sent out 4 applications, and was in the middle of a virtual interview when my phone buzzed with a call from Serena. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the 4th call, I picked up. Her voice was different, unsteady, almost shaking. She said, "Wilda, I need to talk to you about something. It's not true. What he told us about you, it's not true." I didn't speak. She kept going, her words coming faster now, and I realized that somewhere in the 2 days since I had walked out that door, something had happened. Something had been uncovered. And the woman who had told me to leave my own family home was now on the other end of the line saying, "Please tell me you didn't send it." I hadn't sent anything. But I was about to find out what she thought I had, and why it had turned everything she thought she knew completely upside down. I let the silence stretch between us on that phone call because I had learned, in the past 48 hours, that silence was more powerful than any words I could have offered. Serena was breathing unevenly, and I could hear Callum's voice somewhere in the background, low and urgent, like he was trying to calm her down. I finally said, "Serena, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't sent anything to anyone." She went quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Then how did they find out?" I asked her to start from the beginning, and what she told me over the next 20 minutes restructured everything I thought I understood about the night I was pushed out of my own home. Apparently, one of my father's neighbors, a retired woman named Gloria who had known our family for over 15 years, had witnessed the entire scene from her front porch that evening. She had seen me carry my suitcases to my car. She had seen my father standing in the doorway without moving to stop me. And Gloria, who had apparently always thought highly of me and had very little patience for what she called ugly family behavior, had told her daughter about it. Her daughter happened to work with a property attorney who had done legal work for my father in the past. That attorney, upon hearing the story, had started asking questions. And those questions had led somewhere my father had never expected them to go. It turned out that the house I had been kicked out of, the house my father had lived in for 23 years, was not entirely his. My grandmother, before she passed, had quietly amended her estate documents to include my name on the deed as a co-owner. She had done it 7 years ago, told no one except her attorney, and had made it contingent on my father's continued residency and care of the property. The moment I was removed from the home and could demonstrate I had been displaced, that condition triggered a legal review. My grandmother, apparently, had seen things in my father that I had only recently begun to acknowledge myself. She had loved him, but she had not trusted him completely, and she had made sure that I would have something solid underneath me if he ever let me fall. I sat in Priya's small living room listening to Serena explain all of this, and I felt a strange and overwhelming wave of gratitude for a woman who had been gone for 4 years. My grandmother had never told me. She had simply acted, quietly and deliberately, the way she had done everything in her life. She had planted something in the ground and trusted that I would be standing there when it grew. I pressed my hand against my grandmother's jewelry box sitting on the shelf beside me, and took a slow breath. Serena was still talking, saying something about how my father had no idea, how Callum had no idea, how she had no idea, and I believed her about Callum and possibly even about herself. My father I was less certain about. Within the week, I had been in contact with my grandmother's attorney, a composed and precise woman named Harriet, who walked me through every detail of the estate amendment with patience and clarity. The co-ownership was real, documented, and legally sound. It meant that no one could sell the property, refinance it, rent it out, or make any significant alterations without my signature. It also meant that my father, if he wanted to remain in the home with any kind of formal security going forward, would need to enter into a proper lease arrangement with me. The man who had told me to vacate my room, who had stood in the hallway and called me dramatic as I carried my suitcases to my car, now needed my signature to stay in the house he had lived in for over 2 decades. I did not celebrate. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect a certain kind of satisfaction in a moment like that, and I felt something much quieter instead. I felt settled. Like something that had been slightly tilted my whole life had finally found its level. I arranged a meeting with Harriet, my father, and Callum at the attorney's office on a Thursday morning. Serena did not come. My father walked in looking like a man who had rehearsed what he was going to say and then forgot all of it the moment he sat down across from me. Callum stared at the table for most of the meeting. Nobody said anything that resembled an apology, at least not in words. But my father's hands were unsteady when he picked up the pen, and I watched him sign his name on the lease agreement for a home that had once been his alone, now legally shared with the daughter he had called a burden. I charged a fair rent. Not punitive, not generous, fair. I used the first month's payment as a deposit on a small apartment of my own, closer to the city, where I had just accepted a new position at a design studio that was better than the firm I had lost. I built something from the space my father had tried to leave me with nothing in. I want anyone watching this who has ever been made to feel like they were too much, too inconvenient, too present in a space where someone else wanted to be comfortable. I want you to hear this clearly. The people who push you out are often most afraid of what you would become if you stayed. My grandmother knew my worth before I fully did, and she made sure the ground beneath me was solid even when the people above it were not. Sometimes being removed from the wrong place is exactly the beginning you needed. If this story touched something in you, don't leave without hitting that subscribe button. Every day we bring you stories like this one, real, raw, and powerful. Stories about people who were underestimated, pushed aside, and written off, and what happened when life finally turned the table around. This is the kind of content that stays with you. So subscribe right now, turn on notifications, and make sure you never miss a single story. Because the next one might be exactly what you needed to hear.